game, but, you know, Arsenal got what they deserved here, Jack, on both legs. Absolutely nothing.
Newcastle, 2-0 winners on the day, 4-0 on aggregate as they are through to the Carabao Cup final. Newcastle headed to Wembley. For more on this, we welcome into the show good friend and colleague and a World Cup winner in Frank Leboeuf. But since it's a big Newcastle victory, I feel like, Shaka, I got to start with you. How good were they, I guess, over the course of the 180 minutes, but specifically today?
Listen, I thought Newcastle, again, were outstanding on the day. At a time where you're looking for a response or you're looking to see which Arsenal shows up, given their performance and result on the weekend, I thought certainly at the Emirates, while Newcastle came away winners, I thought Arsenal showed exactly what they could do, but you saw nothing of it. And credit to Newcastle for the way they closed on. And while, yes, David Raya has to take a huge slice of responsibility for that second goal, the way Newcastle closed down, Gordon coming in from Newcastle's left-hand side, cutting out any angle for Raya to try to pass the ball, so they only had one option up through the middle. And then that high line of Arsenal and Alexander Isak and his pace, they just could not play up against it. All they had to do was held the ball in behind, and Isak was clean through. Even before the chance that Odegaard, and as I said, should have scored, Isak had the ball in the back of the net. He was narrowly offside. But that was a warning of things to come that Arsenal simply didn't heed. From there on in, I thought Arsenal were, Newcastle by far the better of the two teams. Arsenal did nothing but threaten from set pieces. If anybody was going to score more on the day, it was going to be Newcastle. I thought they dominated throughout and were fully deserving of the win.
What Newcastle, Shaq, did really well, and credit to the players and the manager, they got the crowd on their feet and behind them from the get-go. Because even if it wasn't possession of the ball, it was 5 and 6 Newcastle players pressing. And that got the crowd up, and it just G'd the players up. They were without Joe Linton, who's been terrific for them, but Guimaraes and Tonali's performances and his work rate, tremendous. And the two Arsenal centre-halves, they were worried about Isak. And I know there's been talk about Arsenal strikers, and they were looking at, I don't know if they were looking at Isak or not, but he's class. And he got a goal ruled out for offside after a few minutes. It was tight. So they were stretched the whole game. So credit to Newcastle. They played 3 at the back. The wing-backs pushed on. Trippier was harassing and harrying. They won challenges in the middle of the park. And Arsenal had a fair amount of possession, but as Shaq said, they might still have been playing now for another hour. I don't think they would have scored. And Kai Havertz, bless him, he spent the whole 90 minutes basically on the ground. Whenever a defender touched him, he fell over. But this was a strong and is a strong Newcastle side. Dubravka's still keeping Nick Hope out, and he's playing particularly well. The wide guys, lots of pace, very direct, work their backsides off to get back and help the fullbacks. A bit of guile and a bit of physicality in the middle of the park, and a class player playing up front as the number 9. Yes, Arsenal over the two legs, lots of possession, profligate in the game at the Emirates with some of the chances they missed. Not really tonight because they didn't create much. Martin Odegaard should have scored. But Newcastle, to me, apart from all the things that we've said there, just looked like the team that wanted to be at Wembley more. And you got a sense of that within the crowd. And they're back for the second time in a couple of years. They lost to Man United. It's probably going to be Liverpool. Might be Tottenham, we don't know. It's probably Liverpool. But they deserved it over the 180 minutes, and they've played well. And I think Arsenal are going to have to look themselves in the mirror.
You talk about the St James's Park crowd on the day. Keep in mind that Newcastle have lost the last 2 home games coming into this one. And still, this crowd gets behind them in a way. The other thing that kind of stands out at me, and you put up the full screen there with Newcastle starting 11, and there is not a player who had an average game. And 12 months ago, we were very critical of Kieran Trippier, who was going through that spell. His leadership on the day for Newcastle, again, just spoke volumes to his character and his working his way back from that disappointing spell. But then you could start with Trippier and go all the way around, and every single person put in an absolute shift today. And I thought, credit to Newcastle and Eddie Howe for, despite the build-up to this with the games against Bournemouth and Fulham, despite arguably being second best at the Emirates, they were totally dominant today.
Let's get Frank involved. Arsenal are surely in for some criticism here, Frank, but let's focus on Newcastle for just a little bit longer. What did you like most from Newcastle in this performance?
I like the fact that defensively they were very, very disciplined. The same way when they got the ball, they tried to be fast and they had the willingness of trying, and I loved it. And they have so much quality players in the middle of the park with Tonali and Bruno Guimaraes, but the guy who struck me the most is Gordon. Gordon made an assist on Isaac when he was offside, but he was the pass before Isaac hit the post on the first goal. He was away there, but also when he was sprinting back to defend, and even in the second half, I mean the spirit of every player, but especially Gordon, was amazing. I was really amazed by the willingness again of what they wanted to achieve. And as Craig said, they wanted to go to Wembley, and we saw that. Yes, it could have been another game because of Odegaard's goal instead of hitting the post. That would have been maybe different. But again, we saw so many times, Newcastle being up to something precise, up to something more aggressive comparing to the Gunners. I love Trippier. Trippier, oh my God, the guy we saw the warrior, Trippier the warrior, but we saw also Trippier the teaser against the young guys of Arsenal. He was using every tool that he needed to make sure that they couldn't beat him. Everything was perfect. Let's talk about the three at the back: Burn, Cher, and Botman. Impressive. They worked together. They knew how to cover each other. The game was absolutely perfect coming from Newcastle. We cannot say the same from the Gunners.
No, I mean they're sorry. Mikel Arteta has gone out the FA Cup to a horrendous Man United side. Mm-hmm. Gone out the Carabao Cup to a good Newcastle side. Comfortably by 4. He's left in 2 competitions. One they've never won, Champions League, and one they haven't won for over 20 years.
And they're way behind the 8 ball.
And they're way behind. Maybe they'll put a run together. Maybe Liverpool will slip up. But the deficiencies, I think, they're a good side, Arsenal, but at some point when this sort of thing continues, the accountability on Mikel Arteta is going to become more forceful and stronger. Because as I said, the way they've gone out, the first leg talking about the ball, all that kind of stuff,
forgot about that.
That's kind of, this is not the ball. You remember all that? We discussed it. The ball's different in the Carabao Cup, and that's why our finishing was poor. No, your finishing was poor because your finishers are poor. And Newcastle on that day had, I think Isaac scored 2, Shaq?
Yeah.
That's the big difference, and I think as every time Arsenal put in a performance like this and go out of a competition, the pressure ratchets up on Mikel Arteta.
And it comes off the heels of the big win against Manchester City. It's not the consistency you'd expect from a team that wants to win trophies.
But it's not Man City as we know them.
But it's still pride. I mean, it's still a good...
It's not beating Liverpool 5-1.
Of course.
The weird thing about that, and you're right, it's not the same Manchester City, but there's this kind of rivalry that's brewing over the last couple of years, and certainly, antagonizing of each other. You saw that in the first leg that finished, or was it 2-2? You saw that again over the weekend, and how that played out. But you've got to back that up. If you are antagonizing and getting into a war of words or whatever it is you want to call it with Erling Haaland and or Manchester City, you've got to back that up. City have won, 5 of the last 6 titles. You can't take shots at Erling Haaland and then not deliver yourself. Otherwise, it just feels flat. It just feels as though you are celebrating small wins when clearly you're a club built for a whole lot more. And I wonder how that mentality plays into some of Arsenal's own frustrations.
They were toothless up front, and it's just fine coming from me.
Google that image, yeah.
But they were toothless up front.
Outside of set pieces, right? I mean, if it's not a set piece, this team was not coming anywhere near scoring.
And it wasn't just Havertz, who, by the way, was, as I said, the 3 centre-backs just had him in their pocket, unlike Gabriel and Saliba, who had their hands full with Gordon and Isak. And they did lose Martinelli, to be fair, to what looked like a hamstring injury. So that's not ideal, but they had no guile. And Frank's right. Newcastle defensively were excellent, there's no doubt about it, but that was really, really, really disappointing from an Arsenal perspective.
Frank, what's your takeaway, having seen Arsenal crash out of the FA Cup, as Craig mentioned, against Manchester United, and then seeing this performance down 2-0 heading into the second leg, and really offered very, very little in terms of a potential comeback?
Well, at first it made me think that they weren't really into it, because, I mean, at the beginning of the game, you say, well, okay, they came there, but they don't really want to be there. They already lost in the first leg, and in fact, they're not really into it. And as Craig mentioned, they bet on the Champions League and the Premier League. And I think it's only sad and disappointing. I really thought they would fight until the end, and I predicted a 3-2 for Arsenal, and it's very disappointing. And Craig was mentioning the centre-backs today, who are maybe the best pair that we can see in the Premier League and maybe in the world, with Gabriel and Saliba. And when you see them struggling that much, you say maybe that it's because in their head they weren't ready. They weren't ready for that. They were ready to fight at the St. James's Park, against a team who really wanted to win. And it's a disappointment, because when you are professional, when you're a big club like Arsenal, you really have to think of winning everything. The 4 possible silverware should be in your target, but they didn't show that tonight.
If you're Arsenal, and we've discussed this plenty on this show, the constant conversation around having a true 9, is there a better example than these 2 games, specifically today? When you look across the field and you see a guy like Isak doing what he's doing, you look at your guy not doing what he's doing. The only takeaway you can have from this is your Arsenal is we need that guy or something like it, right?
Well, there's been talk of Alexander Isak to Arsenal for some time, that they've been interested.
But that's the difference in this series.
Yeah, without question, that's been the difference between the two. Craig mentioned it. Arsenal, no guile, and he's absolutely right. There was outside of the Odegaard chance, there was absolutely no threat other than from set pieces, and we've been saying that about Arsenal and their set pieces, at least for the last couple of seasons. Other than that, absolutely nothing to offer. On the other side of that coin, you look up the other end, you've got Alexander Isak, who's running in behind defenses, a defense that wants to play a high line, can't with his pace. But then Alexander Isak leading the line allows Murphy, allows Gordon, who are also both quick, to stretch Arsenal defensively. While Arsenal can boast very good wingers, they don't have that out-and-out centre forward to spearhead that attack, to offer that kind of support to the wingers, or create that kind of room for the wingers. So as a result, it just becomes very easy. Newcastle go 3 at the back, you line up against their front 3, knowing full well that they're not going to expose you, and they didn't.
There is a school of thought that he likes a sort of false number 9. That's not my. It wasn't me that said that.
Well, that has to be the school of thought, right? That can be the only explanation for why you would continue to go down this road without a true number 9.
Well, what I would say is a manager he worked under, who up until recently was considered the best manager on the planet, and certainly one of the most successful, and Pep Guardiola, won the Premier League with a false 9, and still went out and bought Erling Haaland because he felt he needed a striker to score goals. And that's it in a nutshell. It's not, you can dress it up with all the fancy words that you want, and all the stats that you want, and all the XG and all this, and the pressing, and all that. Most successful teams, look at Real Madrid. Gone for Mbappe, before that it was Karim Benzema. Lewandowski at Barca, Bayern Munich. The list is endless. And Kai Havertz is a worker, but he's not a finisher. They need... if they go on and win the league this year, I hold my hands up and say I've been proven wrong, right? And I will. But it doesn't look likely. And ultimately, this performance tonight wasn't about Kai Havertz or anybody else. But this is a sorry, Frank. This is a sort of more rounded discussion about their issues. Now, they've just bundled themselves out of two cup competitions.
Their best two chances at a trophy this year, let's be honest.
And put some sort of wishy-washy offer in that Aston Villa were always going to turn down for Ollie Watkins. Which makes you think, did they ever really try and buy a striker when they offered, I think, 60 million? So I think they realised they've made a complete balls up here of the recruitment in this position in the summer. And in January is not really the time, although Man City have spent a lot of money, it's not really the time to be the most productive at spending maybe 80 or 100 million, because most of the top players are in the top competitions at top clubs and they probably won't move. And so there is a situation here now that we all said in the summer, pretty much, that to challenge, we thought it would be Man City this year, but it turns out it's Liverpool. For Arsenal to challenge, they would need to address that area.
Yeah.
They did not, and currently as we speak, that's one of the departments in the team that is costing them.
Frank, it's not going to be the Carabao Cup, obviously. It's not going to be the FA Cup. I guess it could be the Champions League. I guess it could be the Premier League in a long shot scenario. But as a squad is presently constructed, without that number 9, do you see Arsenal winning anything?
It's going to be hard. It's going to be very hard, because I think the fact that they don't have a number 9 and the fact that Mikel Arteta still think that kind of football can bring him to the top, as we see Guardiola not being successful right now, make me think that the way he wants to, in a stubborn way, carry on, getting the possession, trying to go around and everything, is out of fashion. In a way that football evolves in a certain way almost every decade, and if it was the way to be successful, playing with a fake false number 9 and getting the ball and the possession, it doesn't work anymore. And today Newcastle proved that they went back to the old-fashioned way, more vertical. It's proved by Liverpool as well. Even if they are strong defensively, when they attack, they go vertical. They don't wander too much. They don't wait for the perfect pass. They go for it. And every team which play like that have more success nowadays than they used to have 10 years ago, when Pep Guardiola created that kind of tiki-taka. Mikel Arteta was under him, and he tries to copy in a way that. And I thought that he will change a little bit, because he was very strong defensively. I thought he would be more vertical, but he goes to that tiki-taka way of playing, not having a striker. And I think he's going the wrong way. So I don't see why he would be successful in the upper level, which are the Champions League and the Premier League.
That being said, talking about their deficiencies at times going forward, in the 2 games against Newcastle, they haven't defended well. They've struggled. They have.
How much of that is down to the fact they're going up against a guy they don't have in an Isak? I mean, he's the difference maker.
Newcastle could have had 4 or 5 tonight. Yeah, there was a couple of mistakes. One from Saliba that Anthony Gordon should have scored and didn't. But quite often Newcastle cut them open at times. So they haven't defended well, which has been a strong part of their side. But they haven't defended well or well enough in these 2 games. You lose 4 goals. You haven't. And you've got one of the strongest defences, probably in Europe, then they've either done something brilliant or you've not defended particularly well, and I think it's the latter.
What do you think, Shaka?
Oh, without question. Listen, we can mount a lot of criticism at Arsenal today, and rightly so. But I again will kind of stick on the positives around Newcastle and the performance today, and the individual performances. And again, you compare Newcastle's run into this game with Arsenal's. Arsenal should have been in the ascendancy, and they couldn't look any more flat. Newcastle couldn't look any better. And I think that again kind of speaks to Arsenal, and maybe celebrating is maybe the wrong term, given what happened on the weekend, but also failing to address their needs. Whereas Newcastle just kind of understood the assignment and wanted it more.
If we go another few months and there is no trophy for Arsenal, there is no Premier League, there is no Champions League, what kind of pressure do you think that puts on Arteta?
Well, it puts more pressure on him. I don't think I think
That's
he's.
going
I mean, how many years can you go without a trophy at a club like Arsenal? I mean, FA Cup in, what, 2020? At a big club like that, you're spending almost
whatever happens,
hundreds of millions of dollars.
Whatever happens, the board have to open the checkbook and sign a striker. They absolutely have to, whatever it takes. I don't think Arsenal get over that line. And yes, you could go on a FA Cup run, you could go on a Carabao Cup run, as they did this time around. But if we are talking about a team winning the Premier League or the Champions League, they have to spend. They have to address that need.
It's not just trophies, though. It's being in the hunt to have a chance, particularly in the Premier League, right to the death. You know, they have to be in the fight. They can't afford to be finishing the season 12, 15 points behind Liverpool.
Would you back them to get back into the race this year?
Well,
I don't know how you could.
I don't think it's over, because I think, you know, Liverpool would have to keep this sort of tremendous games and points ratio going.
What in Arsenal makes you think they could catch Liverpool? We've just talked about talked about their attack not being good enough, and now you're talking about their defense.
No. The defence is good enough. It didn't defend particularly well for 2 games, or maybe one game certainly at St James's Park. What makes me think there is possibilities of Arsenal getting back in the title is Liverpool. Mm-hmm. If Liverpool, is there going to be? My question is there going to be a drop-off for Liverpool?
My question would be: is Arsenal capable of taking advantage of that?
That is the big question. If Liverpool continue their form of the first half and a wee bit of the season, they will win the league. But it's never quite that simple. And if Liverpool hit a rocky path, then Arsenal need to make sure they're there. Mm-hmm. They're grinding results out, whichever way they can, to put pressure on. When you're asking if it's looking good or bad on the manager, if Liverpool slip up and Arsenal are still miles behind, it's a bad look. Mm-hmm. It's a bad look. And you can only do that for so long. You can't go every season. You know, so if they don't win the league this year, they don't win the Champions League, and Liverpool win it at a canter, and the same thing happens next year, and it might be Man City, it might be Liverpool, whoever it is, and Arsenal are off the pace. By the end of next season, if that's still the same scenario and there's no success, that's a different ballgame for Mikel Arteta altogether. A completely different ballgame.
2 things as regards that. One, it's easier to chase than it is to lead. I think there's a lot of pressure on Liverpool in the second half of the season. We'll see how they stand up to that pressure. And 2, Arsenal have shown that they are very good second half of the season. The trouble is, last 2 seasons, Manchester City have just been better. But if you look at their running, if you look at the second half, end of January through the end of the season, mid-May or whatever it is, they have actually been very good. The trouble is, City were just so much better. And that was the difference between Arsenal closing out and winning the title and City pipping them to the post as they did. If Arsenal could put together that kind of run that we've seen, and Liverpool, we're not sure how strong they'll be. We don't have that same body of evidence. It's a long way from over here. And if you're sitting in that Arsenal dressing room, you've got to know that.
Frank, final thought on this to you. You agree with the boys? A long way from over?
Yeah, it's still a long way to make a statement and to already know if Arsenal will be capable of chasing and maybe winning the Premier League, or if Liverpool is going to be outstanding until the end of the season. I think we saw Liverpool dropping points, but Arsenal didn't take advantage of it. So it's going to be very interesting until the end. I mean, last year, I think they lost the title because they lost Saliba, I think, and or it was 2 years ago. But it was because they missed one guy and one important guy at the back. So yeah, I think it's always like that with the Premier League. You always have a surprise. You always don't know what's going to happen. It's the beauty of that championship, and I'm really impatient to know how those 2 teams going to handle the end of the season.
There you have it.